At the end of the last video, I needed to wait before continuing with the trunking run as contractors had to do some work in the loft. They installed a hatch with a ladder for easier access, as well as LED lighting so it's easier to see what I'm doing. But the bulk of the work was to add some insulation and raised joists to bore the whole loft later. I had them do this in 2 passes, since the plumber needed to do the pipe removal first. I took the time in between jobs to finish the offset in the trunking. I know the flooring will be 18mm thick, so I picked up the shelves from a shelf, as 2 of them added up to 18mm. Then I lined them up against the fitting and made a mark. From this mark to the bottom of the fitting is the length of the section I need to cut. Back in the loft, I can now install the section and the bend. It seems I've cut a bit long, but that was better than cutting short and have the flooring in the way. Now I need to wait for the loft floor to get installed. In the meantime, I'll go install the length that goes in the bedroom, as I left it until the fittings above are installed to make sure the length is right. But before putting it in place, I thought that now would be a good time to patch up that hole. So I had to remove that 45-degree bend again. I switched from the ratchet wrench to a 90-degree driver bit, as it was getting a bit cramped in there. I'm using the same plastering method as for when I installed the back box in the living room. First some diluted PVA to give the plaster a better adhesion. Then I'm mixing some bonding plaster to fill up most of the hole. After applying some bonding plaster, I used some masking tape to cover the threads of the trunking connector so I didn't accidentally clog them with plaster. Then I applied some finishing plaster to make it flush with the wall. I didn't worry about overspreading because anything extra would wipe off with a damp cloth. Then I reinstalled the 45-degree bend. I still have to patch up the ceiling, but I'm not entirely sure how, so please leave your suggestions in a comment. With that done, I can finally fix the trunking length to the wall. After the loft work was complete, I could get back up there to finish laying out the trunking. Despite my measurements, it ended up sticking out more than I'd like, but I don't think it's worth doing anything about it because the load isn't going to be heavy. I'm starting by installing a T-junction, as I know the run will need to double back in a future extension. Next, I'm installing a full length of trunking, but this doesn't go all the way to the other end of the house, so I'm lining it up with the flange and measuring how long the next length is going to be. I'm using the leftovers, so I'll have to use 2 straight sections to connect all the way to the wall. You can see another T-junction as the run will continue to the next bedroom, but I'll do this some other time. Back in the office, I'll start removing the crown molding on the parting wall. With a chisel and hammer, I essentially cut through the glue that holds it in place. Oh, and before I forget, let me address the elephant in the ceiling. Textured ceiling, like I have here, is often a red flag that the paint may contain asbestos, the dust of which you should only breathe if you like the idea of getting lung cancer. However, the survey did flag that before I bought the house. So I got it tested and it came back negative. So I know I'm safe, but bear that in mind if you're attempting a similar project. After chiseling all along the crown molding, I used a utility bar to pull it down. It was nailed to the wall in some places I couldn't see, but since I'm not putting it back up, I don't mind being destructive. It looks like the finishing plaster is cracking all over the place, which may or may not have been caused by my chiseling. So I'll probably remove it all before redoing the wall. If you run a utility knife along the joints, it may help get a cleaner break if you need to preserve the wall finish. With the crown molding removed, I went back upstairs, removed the trunking cover, and marked where it lies against the wall, before taking out the hammer drill and starting to chisel into it. As usual, this kicks up a ton of dust, so I didn't film most of it. Because of the loft floorboards, I won't be able to chisel all the way to the ceiling of the room downstairs, so I might have to attack this from below. But before that, I need to locate this chase. To achieve that, I'm finding the middle, then drilling into the floorboards straight down. This will make a hole in the ceiling of the office, which will give me the location of the trunking. It's a bit destructive, but this felt less error-prone than measuring from above and below. I'm planning on cladding the ceiling anyway, so I'm not worried about the hole, which could be easily patched up, probably. For the last straight line to the back box, I'm using 25mm plastic tubing. It's worth remembering that the advertised diameter is the outside diameter, and a 25mm pipe will only give you about 20mm of inside space. As I learned when running cable to the living room, 25mm is a bit tight for running 4 of the thick Cat7 cables I have. But that's the biggest diameter you can connect to a back box, so I'll have to run 2 pipes in parallel. I'm measuring the width of 2 pipes side by side, adding a little extra and marking that distance on the wall, keeping the hole I made earlier in the center. Then, using a laser level, I trace lines down the wall all the way to the height at which I will place the back box. Now it's time to chase. To accelerate the process, I'm going to try using the circular saw, for which I purchased a diamond blade. However, no diamond blade came in a bore hole compatible with my saw, so I had to buy an adapter, which is basically a precisely cut washer that will make the blade fit snugly onto the saw. Like all circular saw blades, the orientation of the blade matters, and diamond masonry blades go the other way compared to wood blades, because of course they do. Double check the inscriptions on the blade, as well as the direction the saw spins the blade in so that it's mounted properly. Next, I need to set the depth of the cut, which is going to be a bit more than the diameter of one tube. My saw has a dust collection port, so I'll attach the vacuum cleaner to that. I've heard using a saw or angle grinder kicks up way more dust than chiseling, so it's a trade-off, but hopefully the dust collection will help with that. Not much it seems. I think my vacuum cleaner isn't powerful enough. I gently brought the blade to the wall and let it dig itself into it until it reached the set depth, and then pushed up along the marked line. The blade will seize if you go too quickly, so take your time, and also take some breaks from time to time because your equipment will get hot. The circular saw obviously can't go all the way to the ceiling, so I had to switch to the hammer drill with the chisel to finish the remaining edges of the chase, then started chiseling out the middle. The idea here is to do this in passes, creeping up on the high spots, which you can identify by checking if you can still see the line made by the saw blade. Because of the size of the keystone jacks, I'm using deep back boxes at 47mm. This means the knockouts for the conduits are quite far back as well, so I'll have to chase a bit deeper near the back box. Speaking of knockouts, different brands have different layouts for them, which might affect your conduit run, so keep an eye on that. I'm using back boxes from Appleby that I got from Screwfix, because the one gang box has two 25mm knockouts side by side, and the two gang has them at the ends, so that my layout can be symmetrical. In runs where I only need one pipe, I'll use different boxes that only have one knockout in the center. I think I got these at B&Q. Anyway, back to chasing. I'm measuring and tracing the position of the back box, taking into account conduit fittings and the slight bend in the pipe. From time to time, I'm double checking I'm at the right depth by test fitting the pipe and making sure it doesn't stick out of the bonding plaster layer. With that done, I still have about 20 centimeters of brick to go through between the ceiling and the loft floorboards, so I'll have to go blind. I'll use the largest drill bit I have to try and drill a path to the cutout I made in the loft, and finish the rest with the chisel. With a clear path to the office, I can now run the rest of the conduit. I realized it would be neater to install a back box in the notch, so I start by attaching the conduits to it. Downstairs, I put the back box in place so I can measure and cut the conduits to length before attaching them to the back box. After a test fit, I checked that the pipes were deep enough and chiseled a bit more where necessary. Finally, I fixed the back boxes to the wall. You can see me propping the top up to remove as much slack on the pipes as possible. I then placed the trunking flange back in place and I'm done for the conduit run. I started chiseling out the top layer of plaster around the chase to make it easier to plaster over the conduit, and ended up doing the whole wall, but I'll discuss this in another video. In retrospect, my biggest mistake with this task was going for a 100 by 100 mil trunking when a 100 wide by 50 high would probably have been more than enough, but I was afraid of having no room for expansion. I also forgot that the trunking doesn't need to be the same size all the way through, as cables do branch out. Those pieces aren't cheap though, and I was way past the return date, so ordering smaller ones would have been a waste of money. If I were to do it again, I would keep the height of the trunking as low as possible, and expand width-wise to fit my space requirements. I'll see you next time as I finish prepping the room for redecoration. Bye!